in pursuit of health and wisdom. Sapio with Buck Joffrey.
All right, so in January of 2020, I had COVID. Now, this was the OG COVID, the original gangster virus that was out there before vaccinations, before you heard about all these different mutations and all that. And I was super sick. I was so winded, I could barely walk around the block, even after like 3 or 4 weeks. And in addition to that, my lab tests, they were a mess. It looked like I was, potentially going to start developing clots. So I had to go on blood thinners. Anyway, luckily I made it. Unfortunately, a lot of people didn't, but I did, and I made a full physical recovery. Even though I made that full physical recovery, which still took a couple months, it was for months after that I still felt like something was wrong with my brain. So I'm a podcaster, I talk a lot, and I felt like I wanted to say things, but it was taking me a lot of extra time to just get the words coming out right. As it turns out, I found out that a lot of people with COVID, even those with mild cases, had these kinds of issues. I have a psychologist friend, and he told me about a bunch of people that were coming into his office right after having COVID, saying that they were having depression symptoms for the first time. Well, there's been a lot of speculation about why that is. Well, a group in Canada published a small but interesting article in the Journal of American Medicine showing that people who had even mild cases of COVID had a type of brain inflammation after COVID infection. And this inflammation, also known as gliosis, was worst in two parts of the brain called the ventral striatum and the dorsal putamen. Now, I'm an ex-neurosurgery resident, so I know a little bit about brain anatomy, but I'm not going to bore you with that. But I want you to just think of these two regions of the brain. And what's interesting is that both of these parts of the brain are involved with things that a lot of people with COVID complain about long after the disease itself. Damage to the ventral striatum has been linked to depression and something called anhedonia, which is the inability to feel pleasure. Dysfunction of the ventral striatum has also been linked to lack of motivation. So think back, if you had COVID, did you feel unmotivated or like nothing could make you happy after COVID? Well, maybe that's why. The other area of the brain that I mentioned, the posterior putamen, is involved with speech articulation and other cognitive functioning. So I'm guessing in my case, that's why I was having so much trouble finding my words. Of course, we don't really have a cure for any of this right now. Fortunately, time seems to be doing the trick for most people. But the first step on coming up with a treatment is understanding the mechanism of what's going on. That's it for this little medical update. I'm Buck Joffrey from Sapio. If you like what I'm doing, make sure to like, share, and subscribe.